Chapter 2. 2 days after the train carried Arthur to Camp Dick in Texas, a sweet, yeasty smell from the kitchen tickled my nose. I pulled my shawl closer around me, debating whether to help Mama bake or remain brooding in the parlor. I sighed and looked at my hands. Mama said busy hands help pass time. But what did she know, really? She met Daddy here in Downington, where she lived but a short buggy ride away until the day they married. Still, I had to do something to occupy my mind, or I'd go mad thinking about Arthur. Before I made it into the kitchen, a knock rattled the side door. I stopped in the hall. "Why, Miss Graves," Mama used her syrupy voice, the one reserved for my potential suitors. "Barney Graves." Deep, mumbled reply. His heavy steps resounded on the floor. Then a hollow thud. Mama's box of groceries from his store. The oven door creaked open. Now the scent of cinnamon overwhelmed me, but it couldn't lure me in. Not with him there. A shudder passed over me as I pictured Barney's pasty face behind brushy whiskers. He had to be 30 at least. Why in the world did Mama think him a catch? "Rebecca Grace!" Mama's voice sent me flying into the parlor. I flattened myself against the wall and prayed she wouldn't search for me. But Mama knew me too well. Before I finished petitioning the Almighty, she appeared. "There you are. Come walk Mr. Graves to his car." My shoulders sagged. Mama leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're penning for Mr. Sampson, but my advice is finding a man in the same as for baking a cake. It's best to have the ingredients on hand for two in case the first one falls flat." She had a point, though I didn't doubt Arthur. Hadn't his promise been as good as an engagement? After this horrible war ended, he and I would marry and head off on all kinds of adventures. Still, there was no use fighting Mama. I fixed a smile on my face and followed, determined to endure. "Mama said you were leaving, Mr. Graves?" I crooked my fingers around his elbow and led him across the yard. What could I talk to him about? "You must be so proud to see your name up there with your father's now. Graves and Son Dry Goods Store. It sounds quite prestigious. Truthfully, I thought Graves an unfortunate last name, and not one I'd spread across my place of business." His shy eyes lit with hope as I stared up at him. "Yes, Miss Rebecca, I am right pleased." "Well, you should be. Quite an accomplishment for a young man like you." I battered my lashes as he stammered an answer I didn't really catch. He climbed inside his new Model T, and the engine roared to life. I stepped back as the automobile chugged away, splaying a trail of dust behind. I felt a bit guilty after he motored out of sight, as my gaze drifted above the gritty spray and fixed on the expanse of clear blue skies. I prayed again for a life that stretched out into the unknown rather than one that trudged along in Oklahoma dust. The old swing hanging from the massive oak creaked in the breeze. I sat on the smooth wooden seat and pushed with my feet, as I had so many times as a child. It was too early for Arthur's first letter, but I figured it wouldn't be too many more days before it arrived. Would he write words of love or simply tell me about his training? I leaned my head against the weather-worn rope. If only I knew how much longer until we could be together. "Rebecca Grace!" Mama's voice sounded as if she didn't realize Mr. Graves had gone on his way. "Yes, Mama." I stopped the motion of the swing as she stepped out onto the porch. Her gaze roved this way and that, looking for an automobile still lingering at the roadside. "Come help with dinner." A clipped tone now. "Yes, ma'am." I trudged through a carpet of dry leaves, once again yearning to be free of the old routines, cooking, cleaning, collecting eggs day after day. The heat of the kitchen closed around me as I stepped inside, stifling as a wool blanket on a summer day. Mama wiped her forehead with the sleeve of her simple old-fashioned dress. I'll do this. You catch a breath of fresh air, I said. She nodded and stepped outside. An hour later, Daddy sat down at the old trestle table in the kitchen to eat his fried chicken. As much as Mama tried to make us out as some kind of landed gentry, we were just plain farmers. The chicken had come from our overflowing hen house. She wrung its neck herself this morning. We might own a farm that produces more than most, or one that looked as if a bevy of old-time slaves kept every nook and cranny spotless, but really, Mama and Daddy's hard work kept it all going. Daddy bit into his chicken and closed his eyes as if he'd somehow made it to heaven in that moment. And I think he had. Meatless Tuesdays always made him grumpy in spite of his support for Hooverizing to help the war effort. After he swallowed down that first bite, he leaned back in his chair as if to relieve the experience in his memory before chancing another in real life. Did I see Barney Graves earlier? His eyes twinkled at me as I tried to twinkle back. He was by for a moment. Seeing Rebecca Grace, Mama's smugness irritated me, like a bad case of poison oak. I laid down my chicken leg and wiped greasy fingers on my napkin. He delivered Mama's order from the store. He stayed a bit, didn't he? That was for you. Mama turned her attention back to Daddy. I invited him for dinner after church on Sunday. Daddy looked at me, his eyes asking if I consented. I bolted for the stove. More green beans, Daddy? They sure are good. As I returned to the table, Daddy passed a sly glance to Mama. She acted like she didn't see or didn't understand. I sat back down, my fork sparing one of the green beans at a time, lifting them to my mouth in an even cadence. Only the click of our forks against the old tin dishes broke the silence in the room. Then Mama jumped from her chair and hurried to the window. I do believe someone's coming up the road. She peered through the glass before she straightened and smiled. Mr. Graves is back, Rebecca. You better run right out and see what he wants. Yes, Mama. I went out there all right, but not in any hurry. I figured he wanted to invite me to a house dance or share some tidbit of gossip. But that wasn't it at all. He had just handed me a telegram and said to give it to my daddy. Did Barney tip his hat and take his leave? I didn't notice. I held that slip of paper between my fingers, my legs shaking like a newborn calf's. Everyone knew a telegram meant death. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I will be back next Saturday. If you did like this chapter, please hit the thumbs up, share me out,